And I recognize the gentleman from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Tanner, good morning to you.
Good morning.
I echo the concerns that Mr. Nadler and Mr. Conyers raised. I did note a number of letters that you submitted. Mr. Pence just alluded to some of them. People with whom you've worked in the civil rights community, I think you submitted some letters from some people I know in Alabama. There's only one problem with letters. Someone somewhere once said, but only people with bad credit need cosigners. But let me turn to a more important observation than that. You apologized at the beginning of your comments today for the statements that you made. I'm not 100% sure what you're apologizing for. I'm not sure if you're apologizing for how people read the statements or if you're apologizing for making them. So I want to give you some chance to be more specific about that. I want to read you a quote, and first of all, tell me if you said it. Quote, "Our society is such that minorities don't become elderly the way white people do. They die first." Did you say that?
That was part of my statement, Mr. Davis, and I welcome.
Well, I just want to ask you if you said that, and you've said that you did. Is that an accurate statement?
It is a sad fact. And
is it an accurate statement?
I believe that the census data show that life expectancy in Georgia, anyway, which is what I was addressing, is lower for African Americans.
Well, you don't say that. You say that minorities don't become elderly the way white people do. Is that accurate?
It was a very clumsy statement.
Is it an accurate statement?
I believe that I've said, Mr. Davis, I may not completely understand the question.
Question is it accurate that minorities don't become elderly the way white people do?
The statistical data indicate that life expectancy is lower for minorities.
Then you say they die first. Who is the they?
The was addressing the sad fact that the inequities in this country are such, and I am not an expert on all of those inequities. I know that members of this committee.
Well, let me slow you down because we only have 5 minutes, and you'll have an opportunity to respond to our comments when my time is precious. Let me ask you this. My state of Alabama, 2004 presidential election, what percentage of minorities do you think voted in that election for president, Mr. Tanner, in my state of Alabama?
I do not know the figure, and I would like to make sure before I give any information.
Do you have a ballpark guesstimate?
I don't have an estimate. I would have to.
Number was 73%. Do you happen to know what percentage of whites voted in my state in the presidential in 2004?
I also do not know that.
The number was 74%. Do you know what percentage of those minority voters were elderly in my state?
It's my belief, but I would have to check the data, that elderly voters in Alabama, many of whom I worked with, are more or have good turnout.
Yes, elderly voters have good turnout, and in fact, minority elderly voters have very good turnout, don't they, Mr. Tanner? In fact, just to frame this in terms of statistics, in my state of Alabama in 2004, of that 73% black voter turnout, 40% of them were over 60. That is actually a higher percentage than in the white community. So if you look at the statistics rather than your stereotypes, elderly blacks are more likely to vote than elderly whites. And I think this is, did you also make the comment, by the way, that blacks are more likely to go to check cashing businesses at some point in Georgia? Did you make that observation?
In addressing the Georgia...
No, don't give me a long answer. I don't have the time. Did you make the comment or did you not make it?
I made a comment about that.
Okay, now, this is the point, Mr. Tanner, I think we want to drive home. Do you have any statistics about how many blacks visit check cashing businesses versus the number of whites who do?
Excuse me. I do not have any with me, but I believe that such statistics about the number of unbanked persons here in the United States by race would be available through the Office of Comptroller of the current.
Do you know those numbers?
I do not know those.
Well, this is the problem. Once again, you engaged in an analysis without knowing the numbers. And the point, Mr. Tanner, if I can just finish my observation, Mr. Chairman, you're a policymaker, sir. You are in charge with enforcing the voting rights laws in the country. And if you are not fully informed about things that you're talking about and pontificating about, if you're basing your conclusions on stereotypes and generalizations, that raises a question in the minds of some of us whether or not you are the person best positioned to make these choices. You said that minorities don't become elderly the way white people do. They die first, and you say, well, that was a horrible generalization on my part. You say you don't know how many elderly minorities vote versus the number of whites who vote who are elderly. You make observations about people going to check cashing places, and you suggest that, well, because blacks go to check cashing places, they surely must have photo ID. And then I ask you if there's a statistical basis for that. You say you don't know it. If you are basing your conclusions on stereotypes rather than facts, then it suggests to some of us that someone else can do this job better than you can.
I would welcome an opportunity to address that. I did not make my decisions based on assumptions. We looked at the numbers. I had been surprised by those numbers, and I was trying to...
Did you look at numbers regarding elderly minority voter participation? Because those are the relevant numbers.
The relevant numbers, I believe, that I looked at were whether or not there were people who did not have photo ID in Georgia. And the statistics...
Did you look at numbers regarding elderly minority voter participation? And can you cite those numbers to the committee?
The data showed that everyone in Georgia, that there were more people who had the ID of all ages, more voting age people who had the ID than there were voting age people who were eligible to have the ID.
Did you look at the percentage of elderly minority voters in Georgia?
In making the decision, I looked at the facts that were relevant to the...
Did you look at the percentage of elderly minority voters in Georgia?
No.